Hey, welcome back to Album April. It's April 20th, and today I listened to Everywhere at the End of Time, Stage 6. I have a lot to say about this, so I'm just gonna get started. The music has continued to degrade. Every single thing that was present in the first album, the record player, even the vinyl crackle, fades away. It's replaced with a much more digital sounding static that almost sounds like the ocean. There were a few points where I heard something that I thought might be one of the noises from the record player, but I honestly couldn't tell. However, having already listened to stages 4 and 5, the first half of stage 6 kind of just felt like more of the same. I almost fell asleep in the first half of this album. But it's in the second half that things started to get more interesting. In contrast to the very clinical song titles in the last two albums, here they're definitely being a lot more overt about what this album is communicating. The names of the tracks are A Confusion So Thick That You Forget Forgetting, A Brutal Bliss Beyond This Empty Defeat, Long Decline Is Over, and Place in the World Fades Away. This is confirming a suspicion that I've had for a while and I've hinted at a couple times in this review series. Stage 6 ends with the patient that this series is about passing away. And you start to really feel the magnitude of that in the third track. This is the first time I can think of in the series that really uses silence to enhance its effect. After what at this point was literally hours of noise, suddenly the music was like taking a pause and letting things be quiet for a bit. This also led to a few moments that I'm sure have jump scared people. I personally didn't when I was listening to it. But there were at least three moments that come to mind where it was almost dead silent and then there was like a really loud sudden noise. And that leads us to the final track in Everywhere at the End of Time, Place in the World Fading Away, which the series had been building up to for 6 hours. I was trying to predict how it was going to portray the death in this track. My guess was that there was going to be a sudden stop, complete silence, and it's going to stay silent for 30 seconds to a minute at the very end. And while I was kind of right, the ending was actually a lot better than I was expecting. As the final track revs up, you start hearing something that you hadn't heard in a while. Music. Not from the record player, but from this very ethereal sounding synth playing these long, slow, ambient chords that almost sounded like a church organ. It doesn't sound happy, it doesn't sound pretty, really, even, but it does sound calm. For the first time in literal hours, some semblance of order is penetrating all the chaos. And then came the most shocking moment in this entire series. At around 2/3 through the final track, the music is cut off, interrupted by what I interpreted as the sound of someone removing the needle from a record player in the middle of that record, followed by what I believe to be someone putting a new record into the phonograph. And that new record is an aria. The song runs its course, it's very sad, it's very somber, and then once the song has faded out, ended the way it was supposed to, the staticky noise cuts out, and then the final minute of Everywhere at the End of Time is complete silence. I had to say, based purely on technical execution, the final track is, I believe, the best one in the entire series. As to whether the second half of Stage 6 made the very tedious 2.5 albums before it totally worth it, I feel like that answer is going to vary from person to person. From what I can tell, the caretaker has been deliberately vague with how he wanted people to interpret this final moment of the series. And while I personally haven't read up on the discourse surrounding this album series as a way to avoid spoilers, I would imagine that every interpretation of the final track falls into two broad categories. The first category of interpretations are the ones in which the moment of silence at the very end being the moment where the patient dies. And the second category of interpretations would be ones that interpret that one needle drop moment as the moment of death. And that is the camp that I fall into. This comes from the main theory that I've been developing throughout this entire series. The music coming from the record players represent memories. They get more faded, more quiet, more distorted as the series goes, as the memories fade away during the cognitive decline. If there had been a very brief moment of record player music right before a moment of silence or something changing, I'd be more inclined to believe that might have actually been the moment of death. But the fact that it goes on for 5 or 6 minutes makes me believe otherwise. I think it was that extended period of ambient organs that represented the ascension, going to the other side, leaving the mortal vessel and going to what comes after. And the moment where it sounded like the record was being forcibly stopped is, I believe, the moment of death. So you might be wondering, what do I think the aria is? I believe that represents a period of mourning for the people around the patient, the people who cared about the patient. Yes, the patient is dead, and yes, all their memories slowly died with them, but their life will live on in the memories of others. And since that aria is not plagued with mental decline or dementia, it is allowed to play out exactly as it was intended. And then the series ends with a moment of silence to pay respect. So looking at the series as a whole, while I still do have problems with how the second half was handled, I do think it ended on a very strong note. Would I recommend this series? I don't really know. Yes, it has a strong ending, but you also have to spend a lot of time going through what feels like not a lot of information in order to get there. I would highly recommend listening to just the first 3 stages. Those are a good representation of what the entire series is trying to do in a lot less time. But if you do want the entire Everywhere at the End of Time experience, you would have to listen to all 6 stages. I definitely would not recommend shotgunning the entire 6.5-hour series in one sitting. I'm very glad that I spread it out the way that I did, but I can't tell you the best way in which you would enjoy your music. I would have much preferred if the second group of 3 stages were the same length as the first 3, but even as is, it's a very unique and very powerful experience. I'm glad that I did it. And with that, finally, I am done reviewing Everywhere at the End of Time. I'm going to go back to reviewing more normal albums tomorrow. I'll see you then.